SAF money goes to. I personally didn't know where my money was going to before I came to Clark. I think Clark students need to be more involved, and they need to, we as council, we have to come up with a way to connect students and knowing about all these things happening in school together. And I think it's our duty as council to bridge that gap between us, to know where this money is going to, because I, for one, had no idea until I joined council. So I think if there was a way for us to advertise or to make, like how we know about, oh, this is happening on Saturday and we know about all these things, why don't we have the same thing for our money? Because that's our money, and I think it's really important that we should know where it's going to. So we should make that a big thing. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm not going to get up here and try to go through a laundry list of everything I personally would spend money on, because I think it's most important for students to make those decisions. And so that's information that I've been collecting. What do students want? How are we going to spend this extra $60,000 that we're getting because of the SAF increase? I think that's really important. Let me just clear the air on EMS. I'm not exactly sure what meetings that Laura was talking about. I know that yesterday I went to a meeting with Mike McKenna, with Jason Smith, with Mark Benoit last night, and we went through EMS's entire budget, and we gave that budget to Andrea Michaels. It is currently on her desk. She is going through it, probably not as we speak, but she's going through it either today, tomorrow, and she's going to tell us exactly how much money she's going to fund for EMS. So that's something that is all but rubber stamped, that's something that's all but taken care of, and that's something that I have worked extremely hard on during this year, and I'm very excited that that's happening, because you know what that means? That means more money in the SAF for student clubs. And last year, we were only able to fund most student clubs 50% of what they asked. That's just not okay. There are clubs out there with like $200. And what can you do with $200 if you're a club for a whole year? Not a lot, honestly. And I think that we need to support those smaller clubs, and we need to give them the budgets that they crave. I mean, within reason, of course. We're not going to be spending money on ridiculous things, but we need to give smaller clubs the budgets that they want so that they can create events for you, because that's where you see your money actually happening, is when you go to events and you are able to participate in those events and gain some enjoyment, entertainment, knowledge, etc. from them. And so that's basically where I would start with the SAF. And I think that it's important that we're not just looking at this new influx of money, but we're also figuring out ways to save money, like we did with EMS, like I've been doing this whole year. Now, I'm a treasurer, so every time there's a request for any sort of money, it goes through me. And I have to look at it, and I have to make sure that everything on there is fiscally responsible. It goes with our bylaws. And if it doesn't, I've been sitting down with groups time and time again, and I'm saying to them, how can you make our money work for our students? And they've been very responsive. That's a question I asked. I got results from it. And that's what I would do with access to the SAF. But again, let me reiterate, I don't have a laundry list of things that I want to do, because I want to hear what you guys are doing. It's your $350. You tell me what you want to do with it. Thank you.
I want to piggyback off a couple of things that Hannah and Lisa have been saying, because I think they're fantastic things to be saying. First of all, as Hannah said, there's some extremely low levels of information about how student activities fee money is actually spent. And as I said in my opening statement, that's something I want to address. The first thing I'm going to do as treasurer is really make sure that I personally understand exactly how all of our funds work, how the money goes in, how the money comes out. As soon as that happens, I'm going to move right on to trying to make sure that everyone else knows that. That's my immediate goal. And then we have to try to decide how exactly we're going to spend it, and that's obviously a far more difficult task. I want to go off on what Lisa said here. We need to make sure that everyone on council and everyone in the student body understands that this is their money. We're just the people who you guys have trusted to get the responsibility of spending it, and we really appreciate that responsibility you've given us. That being said, I have a couple of thoughts. The first is, Clark is all about being engaged with the community. about doing things, about getting together with other people and making things happen. That means that clubs and organizations that are doing those sorts of things need to be getting money. And we're going to fund them within reason. We're going to make sure they have the resources they need to get the things that they need to do done. The second thing I want to talk about is based on something that happened actually just earlier today. I got an email from Jace Farr, who actually lives in Rutland, Rifle representative this year. And she wants to get together with some of her friends and actually an RA on the second floor and paint a large mural on the wall in the common room. She's very artistic, which I'm absolutely not, so good for her. She wanted to know how she could get money for this. And I said, go to grants. Grants committee is, for those who don't know, the student council committee that is responsible for taking out small portions of money for very specific budget requests. This year in particular, grants, almost every recommendation they give has had to be, well, because of the low balance in such and such fund, we're not able to fund the full amount. I want to make sure that for Clark students who have a great idea and want to come together and do it, there's money available for them. So I look very seriously into making sure that grants is fully funded so that we're making sure that every student's needs is met. Thank you very much.
Since we changed our topic of what kind of talk going after everyone having such great ideas of the SAF, but it was strange to me when I was in London last semester and I got an email saying SAF was being raised again, for I think the third time at my time here at Clark. It's irresponsible to just keep raising it every time we have money problems. I feel that the SAF needs to be secure to groups and that groups get the money they deserve. As everyone has said already, every week when I was out of council, we get grant money requests, and every week it would be, we can only spend this much money for these groups. They have to get their own money, they have to do their own stuff. And some of this is they just physically can't, they have such good ideas. We need to fix that. We need to make the SAF more efficient and more efficient, better funded, and just more for the people. We need to have it secure for everyone's budget, not every year have people go out and go, well, I think we're going to get about all our money, and then be very disappointed at the end of the year when they have none. And then we get appeals for all the money that they wish they had. I was part of last year for securing the ISA budget for Gala, legally, of course, through judiciary ways, but I was there for that. I wanted to make sure that one of our founding groups has a large amount of money for such a great event. But as most everyone has said, the money is for us. It's not to squander on little things, it's to squander on squander it all. It's for things that people want and that the Clark community needs. That's what the SAF needs to be for.
To be honest, I really don't know much about the topic. As Hannah and Brian mentioned, students are really kind of in the dark on issues like this. I think something that needs to be addressed. Honestly, I would say that if there is challenges with clubs getting funding for their activities, I would say that if just having checks and balances and seeing where money is being going. Because if clubs don't have enough funds, that means that the money is going someplace else. If we're allocating funds away from the students, this is where they don't know where it's being used, and that causes a problem for us. So I think that's the first thing I would try to find out is like, where is the bulk of the money going? How can we help direct some of that back to the students?
My top accomplishment in shifting funding from EMS to the university began back in April of 2009 when we first brought this attention to the administration. When we told them that this was not fair, that this was money that had to go to student groups because that is what it was intended to do. Because it is not a club that should be out there saving lives and money that belongs in student club organizations. I would have to say most definitely my most big accomplishment on this subject was bringing it to the attention of the administration and trying to follow it through as much as I possibly could during my elected term.
I would say that my biggest accomplishment with EMS is the meeting I had last night, because that meeting is what's going to make EMS actually funded by the university. It's about 2 weeks away, and it's something that I started working on with Alec Camino at the beginning of this year. And I've had meetings with Jack Foley, Mike McKenna, and I'm super excited about this new achievement, and I'm super excited that clubs are going to be able to have access to this money now. Thank you.
Okay, and so now we're going to move on to questions from the audience. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Truthfully, I haven't had much interaction with EMS as a member of council. So I was on the judiciary. EMS was largely before I even came to Park. But I've spoken to many people about how the SAF and EMS, the budget has become skewed and how things are not as great as they seem to be. But I will work just as hard as anyone can to get the money needed for EMS and the money needed for council, and to get administration and help with both of those accounts.
Hi. So as I've stated, I used to be the secretary of student council. Now, what does the secretary do? The secretary sits at the left hand of the president and writes down everything that happens. Now, this is actually a little fortunate for me because whenever I write something down, I remember it. So one of the main things I had to work on as secretary, which also means I was the chair of the communications department, is really improving the communication between student council and the student body. And after not being on eBoard for a year, I was wondering, really, I'd like to know what has been happening. I'd really like to be in the loop. So I went online, I checked out, and interestingly, the last minutes up there are the ones I wrote a year ago. Now that's odd, because I made a very clear and concise effort to always be in touch with our webmaster, to always have our minutes typed and distributed, to always have that TV running the script and the actual footage, better put, of the entire meeting the day after. I also work with Rock U to have our meetings taped and put on air. Now, the fact that I can't find any information, quite frankly, is a huge conundrum for me. Like, why is it that my student council representatives, the people I have elected to represent me, to the administration and in front of the student body, will not communicate to me what they have been doing? Why is it that certain links are broken? Why is it that I can only find the new faces of representatives, but I can't actually find what they've done? Now, if I were elected student council president, I would make this my top priority. The newsletter that I founded and worked on arduously with the communications committee, I would have that started again. I would make sure that students never have to look out again for information that was consistently delivered to them. As I'm sure Gwen and anyone else in the Scarlet can know, we have always had the Scarlet sit in on the student council and write down what we've done. Anyone who claims that we currently have a new Scarlet section featuring student council that's quite frankly blatant misinformation. I'm sure Gwen and Eddie remember who I said the minutes to. I'm elected, I would represent this.
I'm confused as to what you mean by that.
There have been some claims that there's a new Scarlet section, and
That's referring to our website.
he's referring to your website.
We never had a student council section.
It's
Just clarify.
That said, the student council website, quite frankly, is below par. Anyone who claims that they can find information easily, I don't know what powers they have that I don't, but I had to specially request the minutes so I could look over the past year, the incomplete minutes.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate that we have to keep things as brief as possible so that we can get to all of the questions asked by the audience.
So, as Laura mentioned, this website issue is quite conundrum. When I was running for Rebel Rep, I went on the website to find out the information about what student council did, and it was very lacking. But I don't think the fact that it's lacking is a huge surprise to many people. I think the fact that nothing's been done about it is a simple surprise. And so what I did is, during my office hours that day, as soon as I was elected, I went and I talked to Lisa, and she and I had a fantastic discussion about it. This is the situation. This is clearly unacceptable. What can we do about it? Lisa immediately went to Hannah, who's chair of the communications committee, and they've had Emily Schofield, who is the webmaster. They've had her coming into meetings. They've had her working on this issue, and that website is going to be up to date. The three of us have been working on this for now like a week and a half. This is when this situation has happened, and we're going to have this fixed. This is something we're working on. How it got that way, I don't know. I haven't been here long enough, but it's going to be fixed. Thank you.
Just to quickly reiterate what Ryan said, so I'm the treasurer. I don't really get involved with the communications department of the student council that often, but that's the conversation that Ryan just talked about is exactly what happened. And you're right, it's not okay that it wasn't up to date. If you look at the website right now and you look for minutes, you'll find some from our last couple of weeks because we have started to have our webmaster come in. The other thing that I've done to increase accountability is I've had CCN come to all of our meetings, and now on Channel 13 you can see all of our meetings with full sound, just in case you're wondering what happens there. That's one of the steps that I've started to work on. Again, I've been treasurer, so this hasn't necessarily been my purview, but it's something I really do care about, and I'm hoping that, I know that our relationship with CCN will continue to improve, and I'm looking for any viable way of getting that information out to students. Thank you.
Being abroad, being away from student council wasn't the ideal situation. So when I tried to find the minutes and such, like everyone said, the website was not fully updated. However, when on Facebook, since everything on Facebook is always official, I did find minutes. I did find information. That was special. But administration doesn't go on Facebook. Most students don't have CUSC as their favorite page on Facebook. So we need to update and make sure that council is out there for the students. My freshman year, CCN did come to student council and came often, and it was kind of scary first being on TV, but we all got used to it. And it was nice to see how students, when walking the UC, would see on our little TV outside the student council office that there we are, and they're on TV, and they're out there. People can understand what's going on in council, and they're not just scary background games. And I want to continue that. I want to continue putting student council out there, whether it be TV, radio, Scarlet, website, anything, any form of media we need to put ourselves in.
How have I affected change for safety? Wow, big one. Well, for starters, I was part of the e-board that brought you the security cameras in high traffic foot locations. Now, I'm sure everyone knows we live in an urban environment, and sometimes Mid-South isn't always the best place to live. Having been one of the time warnings that got sent out, I can firmly attest to it. It sucked. It was honestly one of the worst experiences of my life. There was a gang shooting outside my house, and I was standing on the street, and someone narrowly shot me. And luckily, very luckily, we have put those cameras exactly where they are, because one of the cameras actually did see what happened, and I was able to go down to the Worcester Police Department and identify the member of the gang who was firing a gun outside my house on a Tuesday night. Because of that, this person actually had a warrant stand out for him. So how does this come about? Well, it's quite simple. The AID board that I was on brought safety to this campus through working with UP and the administration. This money did not solely come from our SAF, it also came from the administration, of which I was a huge advocate. That said, I'm sure many people will stand up here and talk to you about safety, and many people will say how strongly they advocate the student council initiative for cameras. But
I'm sorry, the question was what do you plan to do in the future?
That was good. Thank you. Okay. What do I plan to do? I plan to continue this student council initiative. I plan to put more cameras in high traffic locations. I plan to put an ATM somewhere in a very centralized location where there's a light. Because having an ATM in the bookstore isn't good enough because because the bookstore closes by 5. So if you need to take money out after 5 p.m., you're going to be out of luck. I also want to put more lights up, more blue boxes. I want to work with Escort to expand their services and make the administration pay for it so that more students can get across campus without feeling unsafe. Now, I know a lot of people think that safety is really important, and I think so too. I wanted to know, before I came here, I'm almost done. I wanted to know what student council had done with safety since I've been offered. So I went through the minutes, minutes I tried to find and request. And there is one mention of safety on October 20th. And I believe one of my contemporaries, there's no mention of expanding the program. There's no mention of how well they've worked so far in the past. There's no mention of putting up more cameras. There's no mention of expanding S-Work. There's no mention of the problem areas we have on campus, and there's no mention of off-campus housing students. However, there is mention of how the walk to the health services is a little dark. And aside from that, the health services closed at 5, so it's our walk whenever it's dark. There are a few mentions of putting up more blue boxes. There are a few mentions, there's one mention of a call box. Now, I'd love to give you these notes, but I'm sure, as Lisa and Ryan said, they'll go up later tonight, so you can all check. I'd suggest October 20th is the date. Thank you.
So I'm glad Laura talked about the security cameras, and I was part of the student council that pushed that initiative, and I thought it was a great idea at the time. I still think it's a great idea. But to talk about what I'm going to do in the future. On my survey that I already mentioned, I got a response, and someone told me, we don't feel safe on campus because we don't see the presence of the university police. And you know what, that struck me as really important. We live in a pretty scary area, to tell you the truth, and I hardly ever see a police officer walking around. I think it's incredibly important that we start to look into that. We start to ask police officers, well, what are you doing? Where are you going? How can you help us? And not necessarily through any sort of funding, because I think that, we have the resources available. They just have to be used in a way that actually is helping students. And I plan on listening to that person's response, and I plan on listening to other students that talk to me about other great solutions for working on this issue. Thank you.
I think what both Lisa and Laura said were both great ideas. What Lisa was saying, that we have to about the campus officers, I think that is very important because you hardly ever see them about you. There's hardly any presence of them on campus or even at all. And what Laura was saying about expanding the van service, I think that's one of the biggest things that we can do to improve safety. I remember, was it last week or so, I had to wait over 2 hours for campus for the van service to come and pick me up because they're so overbooked. So many people are calling it and have 2 or 3 vans. So I think increasing the number of vans and drivers in general will help increase safety on campus.
Initiatives I want to start. Initiatives I want to do. I want to first get a solid budget. Every year it's flexible and all over the place. And groups fall off. Groups get more money than they should. Groups get less money than they definitely should. It's a huge mess. Another is getting student council out there. Again, we talked about how our website's not updated, but we need to get the council out there. I know so many people are just like, council's that thing that gives us money, right? No, it's the voice that you give, it's the people that you elect to represent you. It's your voice to administration. It's what helps you get stuff done. And I want to make sure that people understand. I want to work to help whatever issues come up next year. I truly don't know what will come next year, but I want to be there for every step of the way, helping Clark advance for a better concept.
All right, so I have 4 things. Number 1, give students more voice in student council. That's something that we keep on reiterating, that's something we keep on saying, but at the end of the day, there's 2,200 students at this university, and every single one of them needs to have a voice in student council. So I have 5 different ways of doing that, and I'll be really quick, sorry Gwen. More open forums, more coffee with, so coffee with Jenny Eisner we had the other day, coffee with the president. Continue doing things like asking students what they want to see through my survey, for example, that I had almost 100 people respond to. Continue to meet with more clubs. I think that every student council representative needs to be going to clubs on a monthly basis to talk about exactly what they want to do, and use all media outlets. That's the CCN, Rocky, and Scarlet. We've already started out 2 of those, but we need 1 more. Second, fix Clark's advertising problem. This is so important to me because if you don't know what events are happening on your campus, then your SAF is not working for you. I've already started with an advertising grant contest. I'm really excited about what clubs are going to do in order to win the contest to bring innovative advertising ideas to Clark. We need to utilize Link more. It's a great software program, and it allows for great communication between clubs and students, but we don't utilize it enough. We need to get the word out there. 3, put more of your SAF into club events. That means working on things like EMS to make sure that the SAF is strong and has a balance that's working for you. Cut frivolous spending. That means no banquets. This year we haven't had any student council banquets. We've had no clothing purchases. That's something that Billy has been working on. That's something I've supported him on. That's incredibly important. 4, improve transportation options. Already, I've been working with the transportation committee, and we've been thinking of things like GPSs on all vans, so you know where those are every single second of the way, and possibly looking into getting a taxi service. That's something that Billy's talking about, and I definitely support him on that. And so those are the 4 things that I would focus on, but again, I want to hear your voice, and I would love to have 5, 6, and 7. Thank you.
There's several things that I would like to focus on. First of all, I'd like to focus on using our resources more effectively. This means making more spaces available for student clubs and student organizations. This means having more study spaces on campus. I would like to continue the work I've already started with David Opp, who's in charge of the Student Athletics Association, which works with student athletes, to expand fitness options on campus, such as having equipment you can rent out from the gym. I would also like to work on safety. I would like to continue the work I've already done in implementing cameras. And I'd like to continue the work I've just begun this semester with Leah Coleman on ways to convince the administration to pay for more escrow services. I'd also like to work on something that's a personal project of mine that happened over the summer. I began renting an off-campus apartment, and I went through a book about this thick about rental laws in Massachusetts, which, surprisingly, are very much in favor of the renter. Now, it's actually a lot cheaper to live off campus, and most students don't know this. So in the course of reading this book, I found out that my landlords are doing things that are blatantly illegal. And because I referenced them to this information, they quickly fixed things like my carbon monoxide detector and my missing fire alarm. I think student council should provide a handbook similar to the one that I produced for President Ikram Islam that would make students more aware of their options. I would also like to continue the work I began as secretary in advertising, as Lisa mentioned. I would like to see the TV that we had installed better used. I would like to see a more streamlined process for slides in the CAD. And I would like to see there be more effective communication between students and student council, and this includes the website. As for the students meeting, student council representatives, each one meeting with clubs, this is a great initiative that President Ikram Islam suggested in, I believe it was September or October of 2010, where he made a list for each student council representative to visit 4 different clubs if they were not already a member of that club, so that student council would always have a liaison with each club on campus. If this is, as Ms. mentioned, she thinks this is a great idea, so maybe this isn't something student council is doing anymore. But if they are, let's continue. And if this is something they cease to do, then I think it should be resumed again. Thank you.
Okay, so not to sound like a broken record here, but the main thing we need to focus on is advertising. So yesterday, actually, I went to student council and we got a grant approved for an advertising contest. This means that clubs will be able to compete every single month to win a grant if they have the best and most innovative advertising that uses new channels to reach new people. And that means connecting with students that are off the meal plan, that aren't in the cafeteria, that aren't in the UC. That means juniors and seniors. This is something I've been talking about very extensively because I think that there really is a disconnect. You know, seniors and juniors don't necessarily go to club events. I think that's really important that they get their voice out there. Also, I talked about Link before. It has this really cool thing where you can select your preferences, and then when you go to Link, you'll be able to see a flyer board with all of the events that are in your preference category. That's something that people just don't know about. That's something students don't know about. That's something that we need to advertise so that if I'm a junior off campus and I'm saying, wait, I really like English, I can get events for Zira, Stern, Scarlet, and I'll be more likely to go to them because they're tailored to me. And so I think just through advertising, we can reach those students in a more effective way. But also, their voices need to be heard. So that's why I do things like having a survey. That's why I email clubs. That's why I think that we should go to clubs like Laura was talking about. Thank you.
As a junior on campus, I rarely actually ever come here to class for practice or something, maybe the occasional lunch in the caf. And truly don't understand what actually goes on anymore on campus, especially since coming back from abroad. But I feel as student council president, I want to change that. Tailor events to off-campus people, to upper class. Make sure they come back to Clark campus and realize what's here. Have events in the middle of campus. Have events off campus. Have them go there. Have it funded by Clark. Have off campus people know that they represent. Have them understand that student council has their back and not just there for underclassmen though have their back for everyone. And just as Lisa said, just advertising. Clark student council just need to get their voice out there because they're the voice of Clarkies. And when the Clarkies can't hear their own voice, then something's wrong. Thank you.
Like Roy, I too am a junior who lives on campus, and the most common thing I'd say when I came back to school in September was, I feel like I don't see anyone. Like I feel like I haven't seen